I'm going to be in Proverbs tonight. I will actually be, I think, in Proverbs the entire time. And I've said many times, my favorite subject in the Bible to teach on is the Holy Spirit. But I think your favorite subject for me to preach on is Proverbs. So people talk about to the most about they learned something or they liked it the best or something. When I talk about Proverbs, and I'm going to go someplace I've never gone before in Proverbs and teach you some things that I've learned that I hadn't learned before. And in Proverbs chapter 1, I'm going to talk about the foundational principles of Proverbs, foundational principles of Proverbs. I think we'll preach several messages out of Proverbs. I'm not sure when and where. Probably, I'd just guess on Sunday nights for a while. And but we're going to start with this one. I want to give you some foundational principles of Proverbs that really will help you a lot if you can get these things. And it'll help anybody. It'll actually help someone who's not saved, but it'll certainly help save people. Proverbs 1, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 9 to start off with. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment and equity. To give subtlety to the simple, and the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase learning. A man of understanding shall attain to wise counsels. To understand a proverb and the interpretations, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. For they shall be an ornament of grace about thy head, and chains about thy neck. All right, we're going to pray and get into this. Father, thank you for the chance to preach. What a wonderful book Proverbs is. The most practical of books is in James. They're probably the most two practical books in the entire Bible. And Lord, we thank you. We can look into this and and learn about life and why things happen and what we need to do and have wisdom. And Lord, I think all of us at points in our life have been fools. And I pray that tonight we learn about that and what not to be, and learn how to have the right relationship with Proverbs and the right relationships in lives. And I pray that your Spirit would pierce to our soul and help us to see ourselves. We need a light shed on us. Many times people who aren't doing good at these things do not know themselves and don't see themselves through the right spectrum and have put rose-colored eyes over their looking at themselves and have looked themselves in the wrong way. And Lord, I pray we would have that discernment. You'd help us to see these things and grasp these things and have exactly what you have from this message may be clear and accurate and true to your word. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, there's a lot of things that Proverbs is written for. It starts off saying, look, I'm Solomon. I'm writing this to my son. I want to give you wisdom and I want to help you with some things. And he kind of gives a lot of words here that are all important words. And every single thing he's trying to do here is important that he's trying to do in the life of his son. And of course, God, who ultimately wrote Proverbs, who used Solomon, it's for us. And it's for God's children and for us to understand and to get the knowledge in all these things. 2 through 4 you can read, and it does say it's to kind of give you a knowledge and to give you wisdom, to increase your learning, but it's more than that. It says to know wisdom and instruction. Okay, now we're breaking down words here because Proverbs does this like no other book in the Bible. It separates things that people think are the same things. Okay? For example, it separates to know wisdom and instruction. Wisdom and instruction are two different things. To perceive the words of understanding. To receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity. Some of these things are very similar. But he says, I want you to understand justice. I want you to receive the words of judgment, equity, equality, all these different things he wants you to get. To give subtlety to the simple. Now, that's an important thing there. See, because we believe in being innocent, okay? And innocent is you don't do wrong things. You don't have to do meth to know meth is bad and don't experience a bunch of bad things. Stay pure till you're married and all these things we tell you to do to stay pure. But that does not mean you don't have subtlety. Because you can be innocent and very wise. And you can be innocent and not get ripped off. You can be not innocent and get ripped off. Just because you are a person who's morally pure does not mean you don't have to be subtle and clever and wise and know what's best to do in situation and know how to handle business and know how not to be taken advantage of. And look, there are many times as a pastor, I have to help people not get taken advantage of. Somebody who has somebody move in with them who shouldn't move in with them. And they're nice people and generous people. They think, well, they don't have a home and they need a place to stay, or this person's in this trouble. And because they don't have any subtlety and a wisdom that says this is not wise, though my heart says to do this, but you don't have to realize they're ripping you off. Okay, they said they needed to stay in there for a week. Now it's been 3 months. Okay, now what happens? And this person, and so to have that subtlety where you know business, you know wisdom, you know how to take care of things and not be taken advantage of and ruined, and have your boundaries of life destroyed and people drag you around into bad situations. That's all stuff he's trying to give his son, and that's part of it also. Now notice the different relationships with all these different knowledge and different types of knowledge, wisdom, instruction, judgment, all these things. And so he's going to give them knowledge and discretion. All these things are different in Proverbs. Knowledge, discretion, wisdom, they're all different. Proverbs, I think 4:7 says, wisdom is a principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thine getting, get understanding, because wisdom and understanding are two different things. Knowledge is different than understanding. Knowledge is different than wisdom. Judgment is different than knowledge. And Proverbs breaks all these things down. And I am not going to teach on all those things tonight, but it's all these different types of knowledge that apply to different things in life. And you want to have those things, but it's a lot about the relationship with those things. So let's take a big circle of knowledge, equity, discernment, wisdom, judgment. All these things are over here, okay? Now he's talking about how to have the right relationship with those things, okay? Look at the words he uses, verse 2, to know wisdom and instruction. To perceive, okay? Know and perceive are two different things. To receive, verse 3, to receive the instruction of wisdom. Verse 4, to give subtlety. Verse 5, a wise man will hear and will increase learning. That's 2 steps. Hearing, everybody hears. Okay? When you're in school, in public school, every single person heard the teacher teach. Did everybody get it? No. Some people were looking out the window. Some people were flirting with the girl across the room. Some people were spaced off. Some people were sneaking on their phone. And some people hear it, but they don't get it. Okay? Wisdom passes by everybody. Bible says wisdom cries in the streets, at the housetops, the corner of the gates. It screams out to everybody. Wisdom is screaming. Most people don't hear her anything she says, but they hear her. But it just passes right by them. And that's why they make the same mistakes that other people, they have that. So it's not only to give the knowledge and the wisdom and all those things, but it's how to receive it. Because that's part of the key. Because a father, with the wisest father in the world, can give instruction to his child, does not mean his child will receive it. Okay? Does not matter how wise the dad is and how foolish the son is and how big that gap is. You think, well, if he is wise and he's foolish, the dad just needs to teach him. The dad should teach him does not mean he'll receive it. Okay? But the Bible says it's very important that you learn how to receive. I'm going to teach you not only these things, but I'm going to teach you to receive instruction. I'm going to teach you to receive wisdom and how to get it. Look at verse 5. A wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding shall attain unto wise counsel. Verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The difference, and this is important because I'm going to build a foundation, and really one thing at the end I want to teach you that's really the most important. But in this lesson, one thing you have to understand is Proverbs classifies people very, very distinctly. Wise man, that's a type of person. A fool is a type of person. The simple is a type of person. The strange woman's a type of person. The virtuous woman's a type of person. They're all different people, and it's not an insult when Proverbs says a fool will do this. Over here, I think it said, fool, verse 7, a fool's despise wisdom and instruction. Fool in our mind is someone who doesn't know anything. You're a fool. You don't know anything. A fool in Proverbs is not an amount of knowledge. A fool in Proverbs is not an insult. A fool in Proverbs is a classification of a person. Okay? That classification of person, the fool, it has nothing to do with the amount that he knows. It has everything to do with what he does with what comes to him. It has to do with what he does with wisdom and knowledge. A fool could actually have a lot more knowledge than a wise man in Proverbs, because it's how they receive instruction and what they do with it. Okay? And so it says, fools despise wisdom and instruction. Verse 5, a wise man will hear and will increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain to wise counsels. Okay? We'll read a whole bunch more verses. They're going to say a fool, when you give them instruction, they're going to laugh at you. They're going to mock you. They're going to hate you for giving them instruction. They will hate you when you reprove them. And a fool that does not receive instruction. They hear it, but they reject it and they fight against it. Let me take you to Proverbs 17. Proverbs 17. In verse 10, a reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. Okay, look at, you see the way they receive it? Verse 2, chapter 18, verse 2, 18:2. A fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. Okay, and there's a lot of verses, and we're not going to go, there's a lot of verses on this. But you see that it's how they receive instruction or don't receive it. Now, let me illustrate this. Okay? Got an 8-year-old kid who's a good kid. You got a 12-year-old kid who's a bad kid. 12-year-old kid's been around the world, done a bunch of bad things. He's very clever and very crafty. And this kid has gotten away with everything, and he's just had a fun time. And boy, here's this 8-year-old who's just a nice, good, obedient boy. They see each other at the store. 12-year-old takes an 8-year-old outside and says, look how much money I have. And he shows him a whole bunch of money. And he says, look, these people don't watch anywhere. I know how to rip off this store and steal from this store. Now, does he know how to steal from the store, and has he done real good at it? Yes. Okay. Does he have a knowledge? Yes. The 8-year-old's dad and mom told him, look, you start off stealing things, son, you're going to end up like in jail someday. You're going to be a thief. You're going to learn bad things. And you know what? What you reap is what you sow, and we're going to discipline you if you do this thing, and it's wrong. And gives him all the good reasons and all these things about why not to steal. And all of a sudden, here's this boy. Does the 8-year-old know the result of being a thief? Does he know that the guy who's in prison now for 20 years started off stealing from that same store? Doesn't know any of that. But the 8-year-old looks at 12-year-old and says, my dad says it's really foolish to start stealing. And it ends up being a terrible life. And I'm not going to do that. Now, who has more knowledge? The 12-year-old. Who's wise? The 8-year-old. You see? You see that there? So the 8-year-old makes a good decision, though he doesn't have all the knowledge. He attained to wise counsel. It's one of the things wisdom does. And so he doesn't make the foolish decision, though the 12-year-old knows a lot more. Okay, we'll get back to that story a little bit later. Now, to understand Proverbs, you have to understand wisdom, and Proverbs is indicative and not absolute. I'm going to teach you the principles to understand Proverbs. What I mean by that, Proverbs is indicative and wisdom is indicative and not absolute. What do I mean by that? It indicates things. Okay? Proverbs makes indications of things. You go and you read Romans and it says, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. You can bank on it. It's done. It's absolutely true. It'll always happen. Proverbs is giving wisdom. And here's what you have to understand about this. And don't miss this, because the wording is very, very important that you understand this. Proverbs is God's word and is perfect as everything else, but its purpose is giving wisdom. Wisdom is not absolute. Wisdom is basically percentages. Okay? So Proverbs says, if you do this, this happens. And that's generally what happens. But it doesn't mean every single time you do that, that's going to happen. It means it might be 95%. Okay? And so Proverbs is not absolute in all of everything it says. It's wisdom. What it says is wise. But if you make an exception to Proverbs, because it's not a promise of God, it's a wisdom that indicates things, that this is what wisdom says. It does these things to you. Now, I'll illustrate this way. You go and you say, look, if you maintain your car will last a lot longer, right? Change your oil, change the transmission fluid, change your air filter, and do all the stuff you're supposed to do. And you know what? Your car is going to last much longer. Then you meet the guy who doesn't ever change his oil, and his car goes forever. Oh, so changing oil doesn't work. Yes, changing oil works. He's an exception. Okay, we get up there and we say, okay, look, if you smoke for 40 years and you drink heavy and you go do drugs all the time and you go and become an alcoholic, you drink a fifth a day, it's terrible for your health and you're going to die younger. Is that true? Pretty much true. Then there's the Rolling Stones. And they don't die young and don't get lung cancer. Why? Because wisdom says that's true, and it's going to be almost always true. You smoke for 40 years, you smoke 2 packs a day, you're probably going to get lung cancer, you're probably going to have terrible health. Then there's the exception. How many people have known the exception? The people with their exceptional health, you're going, why is that guy still alive? And then you see the guy who takes great care of himself and gets diabetes and cancer at 50. But generally, wisdom says, so you say, well, this guy drank his whole life and he'll be 85. And this guy over here, he ate veggie burgers. And look at him. He died at 55. And that's true. Because wisdom tells you something, but wisdom is never absolute because there's a bunch of variables in this world, including genetics, for example. Okay? And so those things work. And the guy changes oil every time, but he got a lemon. It doesn't matter that he maintains his car. He got a bad car. Okay. And so some people say, Toyota's the best car and they buy a Toyota. One of the worst cars I ever owned was a Toyota. Toyotas must all be junky cars. No, they're great cars. I just got a bad one. And usually you buy a Toyota, it lasts a long time. I bought a Ford and went 325,000 miles. Ford must be better than Toyota. No. But there's exceptions. You follow that? And so that's what Proverbs is like. Let me show you some things in Proverbs. It'll tell you what's going to happen. And that's usually what happens, but it's not an absolute promise of God. It's giving you wisdom. It's indicative. Proverbs 12, and let me take you to verse 21. Proverbs 12:21. There shall no evil happen to the just, but the wicked shall be filled with mischief. There shall no evil happen to the just. Really? Never? How many people have known good people who bad things happen to? Now, Proverbs says this is what happens when you live the wrong life. This is what happens in a good life. But sometimes evil happens to the just. But generally, lives are a lot better. The way of a transgressor is hard. Okay? But that isn't every single time. Proverbs chapter 30. Now, God's word is still perfect, but wisdom is general rules. Proverbs, and this is really important that you get that because it's a big part of the message. Proverbs chapter 30. And verse 17. The eye that mocketh at his father and despises to obey his mother, the ravens of the valley shall pluck it out, and the young eagle shall eat it. There'll be a lot of eyeless people in the world, wouldn't there be? Okay, there's a principle here. Look, you disobey your parents, bad things happen. The Bible says you take time off your life. Obey your parents, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long in the earth. Bad things happen. It's not saying literally a raven comes in and plucks it out, but you get attacked and bad things happen to you, and that's just true in life. Proverbs chapter 16. And verse 7. When a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies be at peace with him. By the way, that's usually true. When you please God, God kind of gives you peace and gives you peace with your enemies and works it out. But this is Solomon. Was that true with his dad, David? No. Saul chased him most of the rest of his whole life, Saul's life. Why? Because everybody else, it was generally true. Everybody thought highly of David. Everyone in the kingdom would say, David's right and Saul's wrong, and help David. And David was thought highly of. And most of his, but it's a principle. But you'll still have enemies sometimes that you're not at peace with. A soft answer turns away wrath. You talk quietly. Proverbs 15, I think it's verse 1. You talk quietly, know how to talk to somebody. You talk wisely. And usually you'll turn away their wrath. But there's crazy people. And you talk quietly and it doesn't turn away their wrath. Okay? But that principle is very important, you know that. So you learn grievous words stir up anger, soft answer turns away wrath. That's a principle in Proverbs, and you use that, and you're almost always better and safe off. But then you'll come across the person, you talk quietly and sweetly to them, and they still scream at you. Okay? But the principle is still true. It's just that's wisdom. Wisdom says this is true. And so you be careful and you do those things. And so you get these principles. It does that. Wisdom is always like that. The early bird gets the worm. Is it true people who do things early and get up early and study early and go to college early and graduate early and do all those things, they generally do much better in life? Yeah. The early bird gets the worm. Is that absolutely always true? No. There's some loafer programmer who lays around till noon every day and programs for 4 hours and makes $250,000 a year. And he's a bum, and he programs in his dirty t-shirt he's worn for 3 days. Okay? Now, does that happen? Yes. Is it the rule? No. Generally, those things are true. That's what wisdom does. Wisdom is not doing those things, but it is almost always true. It indicates patterns of life. It teaches about trails. Proverbs 22. Poor translators for this message. Good night. This is going to be a tough one. Proverbs 22. Now watch this. This is what confuses people. And this is why they don't understand Proverbs and life and promises of God. And sometimes they get confused and even have doubts of the Bible because they claim, for example, Proverbs 22:6 is an absolute. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. There's a lot of things this verse says that people don't think it says, and there's things it doesn't say that people think it says. But train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he'll not depart from it. Okay? Now, if that is saying every single child who's brought up right, not one of them will ever depart from it, then you have no free will. And all of us have known good families who produced someone who departed from it. And everybody's known people who didn't train up a child right, and the kid turned out good. You ever seen a bad family produce an amazing child? And you're going, where'd that kid come from? They swapped kids to the hospital. And even the rest of life they swapped them. And then you ever seen incredibly diligent parents who work super hard and do everything right and teach their kids to do right and invest in their kids, and the kid lays around and does nothing, plays video games 12 hours a day and doesn't work, even though the parents have taught him and done everything and given the example and worked hard? You ever seen that? Okay, I've seen it. And so anybody ever seen that? Not if you've seen that. I'm going to ask a question. You either nod or raise your hand or something. And so I know you're awake, and not this kind of nod. So you understand that. So it's not an absolute thing, but is that the rule? Yeah, that's wisdom. Look, if you took a good family and two good parents and they did everything right and raised their kids right and taught their kids right, and they had 10 kids, let's say 9 of them turn out good, 1 turns out bad. Okay? Take the other family, they got 10 kids, they're drug addicts, they fight all the time, they throw things at each other, the dad doesn't go to work, they live out the system, nobody takes care of anything, they cuss their kids, they abuse their kids. How many kids are going to turn out good? You're going to say 0? You don't know a lot of people. You experience life, you'll find out some very bad parents. I know a guy had 12 kids. He was a terrible parent. He has 1 kid who is a incredible missionary. I mean, a godly man. And the rest of the kids, addicts, messed up, disaster. But you know what the truth is? If you do a terrible job raising your kids, you'll probably turn out bad kids. That's wisdom, right? Is it absolute? No, but it's wisdom. You raise a kid right? Is he going to turn out right? Probably. Is it absolute? No, they have free will. God raised Adam and Eve real well, and they turned out bad. Okay, Jesus raised Judas and taught him real well, and Judas turned out bad. Humans have free will. But patterns should teach you something. This is getting ahead of it a little bit. So you see a major pattern in your life. Okay, if you are diligent in your work, Proverbs teaches you, and good with your money, you'll probably do well financially. Okay? Now, there might be an exception to that. There might be an injury. There might be a closure of a business. There might be a layoff or something. Something terrible might happen, and all of a sudden, you've done everything right and your finances are bad for a while. Okay? That's okay. But if you, every 2 years, are bankrupt, out of money, getting evicted, that pattern ought to tell you that I'm not living wisely. You follow that? So wisdom is not 100% because there's exceptions. But patterns and the wisdom says this generally turns out like this. You should learn from that and you should do that. Look, you learn because wisdom tells you, look, you are failing at this. You're doing this wrong. Every situation you should analyze and say, look, at what is wisdom teaching me? It might be nothing. It might be just, look, you were working at this company and they went bankrupt and you weren't, and you didn't know what's happening. You weren't ready for it. And you hadn't saved up enough yet. And at the same time, your car broke down. You know what I mean? Stuff happens. But then a pattern of life where you continually, now you have 10 kids and you're on number 7 and 7 of them are bad. You're not just unlucky then. You follow? Wisdom is teaching us, though wisdom is not absolute because there are exceptions, because we live in a random world. We live in a world, like my family didn't turn out good as far as me growing up and parenting and stuff, because every statistic and wisdom would tell you a single mom, divorced twice, who's working all the time is going to turn out troublesome kids, which happened. But I didn't turn out bad. Why? Because there's a variable in there called the Lord. Okay? And that variable changed me. And so I am not in the same pattern. I am supposed to, by wisdom, okay, you ready? By wisdom, I'm supposed to get divorced. I'm supposed to be an alcoholic. Okay, that's what wisdom says. That's what me produces. Okay, if you are raising a single parent home, the statistics, or you could call that wisdom, tells you you are 600% more likely to end up in jail. But are there some kids from single parents home who turn out good? Yep. Never go to jail once. So I know I'm belaboring the point a little bit, but I want you to understand that Proverbs is indicative. And it's teaching us this is wisdom. These are patterns. And so you don't say, well, they had one kid turn out bad. They're terrible. Or you can say, you know what? That kid turned out good. They must be wonderful parents. You don't always know those things. You say that guy's got good health and he's baking burgers every single day. Baking burgers must be good for you. Okay, that's maybe not a good indication. And so you learn those things. So some people can drink all the time and not become alcoholics. Okay? Do you know some people can be drug addicts and have great careers? Is that normal? No. Is it true? Yep. How many of anybody here, a man who grew up and drank his whole life, had an alcohol problem, but was a good worker and worked his whole life? Anybody know somebody like that? Okay. Look, how many people know somebody like that? Is that normal? No. So you wouldn't look at the one person and say, look, that guy drank his whole life and had a great career and never got a beer gut. So I'll never get a beer gut if I drink my whole life and I'll have a great career. No, that's not wisdom. That's not the normal. And so you learn that. And so we see that. Okay, now, Proverbs gives us this wisdom, and this is how life works. And so we get those things, and we understand those things. Now, Proverbs takes a long-term look at life. Let's look at Proverbs 14. You see, these things are all unrelated. They're actually all related. And the last point, and is my next point, is going to explain it all. Proverbs 14. Proverbs is taking a long-term look at life. Proverbs is not a daily thing. This is the way life works. Proverbs 14 and verse 12. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death. Proverbs 16 and verse 25 says the exact same thing. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the ends thereof are the ways of death. Proverbs 19 and verse 20. Hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou mayest be wise in the latter end. Okay, now I can take you to a bunch of verses in Proverbs. Proverbs doesn't do this. Look, if you eat a bacon burger, it'll taste good. Okay, that is true. Okay, but that's not the way Proverbs looks at things. Proverbs is not saying what happens in this moment. Proverbs is saying if you eat bacon burgers 3 meals a day for the rest of your life, you're going to die of cardiac arrest. That's the way. That's not a verse in there. Okay, just so you know. But that's the way Proverbs looks. It looks the whole picture of life. And it sees long-term patterns. And so you look and say, this is generally how life works. This is what the end of a thing is. This is what the result of this lifestyle is. This is what the result of alcohol is, Proverbs 23. This is the result of not listening to your parents. And this is the end of that. To see a man who's lazy in his work, look at his fields. And his fields in the end are overgrown with weeds. And that person in the end will come to poverty. In the end is Proverbs' pattern. Now, let me go back. Let me give you those 3 points. Now let me teach you what I want to teach you, the biggest thing to understand. Proverbs is indicative, not absolute. Proverbs is teaching you how life works, and it's teaching you that. It's not an absolute, it's patterns. Proverbs takes a long-term look at life. Now, fools don't listen. Okay? Now here's what I want you to get right here. Ready? Fools do not listen because they're overconfident. After a while, you get some wisdom, you get the book of Proverbs down a little bit, you can talk to someone, and in 1 minute, you, not on purpose, not because you don't like somebody, but you can just, I can be preaching a sermon. By the end of the sermon, somebody I don't know or someone who's changed, I can say they're a fool now. And I can know that person won't get anything for the rest of the message. All they're going to do is hate me. I can know that because fools do certain things and they're very, very consistent. And the first thing they are is overconfident. They're overconfident when they shouldn't be. Let me take you to Proverbs 12. Proverbs 12, and the rest is going to go pretty fast here. Proverbs 12. Actually, let me take you to Proverbs 14. We'll go there. I don't want to read the same verses twice. First, Proverbs chapter 14, verse 16, it says, "A wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rageth and is confident." So a wise man, it says, fears and departs from evil. So a wise man comes along and he sees this and he says, whoa, that looks dangerous. You know what? I'm not going to do that. Okay, I'll give you an example. My wife and I went away for our 25th anniversary. We went down to Lincoln City. And there's a spot in Lincoln City where you go around rocks at low tide. Okay, and over there is where the agates usually are. And you got to climb over a bunch of rocks to get there. And then you can only go at low tide. And then you go around the corners. There's a wall of rocks here. And then there is, and you hop down rocks, and then you got to run across the sand at low tide, and you're okay, and you can be over there for a long time if the tide's low enough. I was going over there, been over there many times, and I was climbing there, and I climbed on the rocks. I love to climb everything, and I'm walking along, and another guy came along, older guy, and he says to me, he says, pretty dangerous over there today. He says, I've lived here my whole life. He's probably 65. He says, I lived here my whole life. He says, the tide, we're having big swells right now. And he says, you got to be really careful. I said, you saying you can't go over there at all? He said, no, you can still make it. He says, he says, right now that section, there's a narrow section width of this stage. He says, you can walk across there, but you got to time it because there's big swells right now. The problem is those swells come and they knock you against the rocks and pull you out in the water and all the stuff they do. And so I just stood there and I watched and I got the pattern. I said, all right, look, now the waves are going out. I got lots of time here. I walked over there, went across there, messed around, went over there, explored things. My wife didn't want to go. She thought I was crazy. And so I said, but this is fine. But I listened to the guy. I didn't say you can't go. He just said, be careful because of the big swells. I looked down. I saw all the waves are going out. I watched a bunch of them. I watched the pattern of it. Then I looked out and I saw no big waves coming. We're looking good. Boom, over there. Went past where it mattered. Doesn't matter now. I'm over here. I went back. Same thing. Didn't even get wet, except for my feet. And so walked back over there, no problem. Next day, same old guy, him and his wife go walking there, and a guy walks up to me, this scraggly guy just walks up to me. The old guy is over there, and the scraggly guy walks up to me, soaked head to toe. He starts talking to me. Hey, man, how's it going? Oh, it's going fine. How you doing? Man, I just took a swim. I said, really? What happened? He says, well, the old guy up there told me it's pretty dangerous there. And I figured, I can just run across there real quick. And man, that wave slammed me. And I'm like, I got out of there. And I said, yeah, those waves are pretty dangerous there. He was overconfident. He didn't listen to someone who's wiser. And so because he's overconfident, now, fortunately, he didn't whack his head on the rock. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here. By the way, every single day, twice a day, while we're there, a rescue helicopter flies over there and checks that spot because people get trapped there. The tide comes in, they can't get out. And they charge you, they told me they charge you $800 to take you out. And so, well, because the wise man sees a danger and is very careful, the fool is raging, confident, I can do this and I'll be fine. Why does he think that? Because he's overconfident. Why might he be overconfident? Because he might have seen someone get away with it. Because, and here's the thing, fools think they're the exception. That is so important you get that. A fool thinks he's the exception. Every 18-year-old starts smoking says I can quit whenever I want to. Bless God, it's no big deal. You know what, my buddy's been smoking 20 years. That's all the things a fool will say. They're overconfident. Proverbs chapter 15. Verse 5, a fool despises his father's instruction, but he that regardeth reproof is prudent. Proverbs chapter 26. Verse 5, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. So since he's so confident, and since he thinks he knows everything, and since he is overconfident and he rages, and he thinks he's the exception because he might have seen the exception. Okay? The average person who goes out and goes into a life of crime, the average person, and you ready? This is so important. The average person who goes into crime is broke. Do you know that? Okay, that's very common. Now, you say, no, man, drug dealers make a lot of money. Look, I used to watch the drug dealers in the ghettos in Chicago with big wads of money. And then it's that same drug dealer get arrested, and they don't let him take his money to jail. And then his fancy Cadillac is getting towed. And generally, but ready? What does TV show you? The people who do wrong do great. And the people who do right are these miserable people. Because a bunch of fools make movies in Hollywood. And so they say, well, I know somebody who went out and did this and they got away with it and they did this. I know a guy never went to college. Hey, look at Mark Zuckerberg. Where did he go to college? Okay. There's billionaires that never went to college. Generally, there's high school dropouts who are very wealthy. And I know my buddy. Okay, you're a buddy. But here's what you're not doing because you're a fool. You are not looking at the long term. You're looking at this thing. Okay? And 2, you think you're the exception. And 3, you're overconfident. Because that's what fools do. And they say, well, it's not true that if you don't go to college, you can't have a good life. It's not true if you smoke, if you smoke pot, it doesn't affect your career. Do you want those statistics on that? It's awful for your motivation. It damages the part of your brain that says you need to be motivated. It's terrible for it. Now, you ready? I grew up around potheads in my home all the time. Now they've had all these massive studies. They come out with studies all the time now that say pot does 2 things. It takes away the motivation for what you should be motivated for. It damages that part of your brain, number 1, the things you should be motivated for, and it gives you motivation for things you shouldn't be motivated for. It double damages your brain. That's why when they should be saying, I'm going to lose my job or I'm going to lose my house. Pot says, hey, dude, just relax. It's all right, man. No, don't relax. Get a job. You're going to be evicted. Don't relax. What are you talking about? And you go, well, I knew that before the studies ever came out. Why? Wisdom said it. I watch one of my family members. I watch people I love. I have watched people in the ministry for 30 years. Dude, God made weed. Yes, he made rocks. Just go ahead and drop it on somebody's head because he made rocks. I mean, what does that mean? He made arsenic. Doesn't mean you drink it, okay? And so, they don't think that. I'm going to go back to college someday, dude. Just relax. It's okay, man. Where's my chips? And you sit there and you go, why do you think it's going to turn out good? But they're overconfident. And they haven't learned from anybody else. I learned that from watching potheads. Now the studies come out. Now we know physically exactly what part of the brain it actually attacks. We know that now. That's all the scientific stuff. That was wisdom a long time ago. Wisdom teaches you that stuff. And so you learn that stuff. But a fool says, I can do it. I can get away with it. I know somebody who did it. Look, I feel great. And they're motivated for a while. This is why he does not listen to wise people. Let's look at Proverbs. We read Proverbs 1:7, Proverbs 15:5. We read. Let's look at 23:9. That's why a person who is a fool does not listen. Because they think they're going to be the exception. They look short term. They see someone who didn't turn out that way yet. They see their buddy who went out and lived with a girl for a few years, and then it turned out pretty good for them, and they've been together 6 years. They don't see the 75 who didn't turn out good. Okay? They don't see that because they don't look long term and they don't listen to wise people. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 9. Speak not in the ears of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of thy words. They tend to see what they want to see. Proverbs 17. Proverbs 17. They tend to see what they want to see. Proverbs 17 and verse 4. A wicked doer giveth heed to false lips, and a liar giveth ear to a naughty tongue. What does that mean? It means that they see what they want to see. Here's the life spectrum, and this all turned out like this. But if I do that, I have to do these things, and I don't want to do those things. I think this is fun, and I think this is easier, so I'm going to do those things. And look, these guys, this over here, look how that turned out. Yep, that's the way it is. And you know what? I'll do that, and that's the way I'll turn out. I'll be like that. That's a fool right there. So someone over here comes over to her and says to you, hey, this isn't wise. If you do this, this isn't a good way to do this. This is not wise. Get away. I don't want to hear what you say. It is wise. Look over here. Look over here. No. Look over here. Look over here. No. Get away from me. I don't like you. You're criticizing me and what I do. And it's my life. And you're trying to judge me and get away. And they're a fool. And you know what the Bible says to do? All right. Hey, man. How about them Seahawks? That was a terrible game they played yesterday. And you just let them be a fool. Because they want to see the short term and the exception. Because it's what they want to do. And so they'll be foolish. And hopefully what happens is down the road, they come along and say, this isn't working, man. This is stupid. And here's what changes a fool once in a while is somebody behind them comes up and says, man, you're going that way. Is that a great way to go? And they're going, you know what, man? I used to think this is a great way, but this is not. Don't start. I.e., smokers. How many smokers thought it was cool, and then they said, I wish I never started. And then what they do? They sit there and say to their kids, I'm telling you, man, don't ever start. Why? Because they're not a fool anymore. They're just weak now. You follow that? And now they've learned. They're not a fool. They're instructable. And they're trying to instruct someone, and now they've realized, yeah, that wasn't so good. This is good. And so you do those things. Proverbs takes a long-term look, and so you do those things. So what are we trying to say here? For the poor translator who's trying to translate this thing. What are you trying to say? Proverbs gives indications and patterns. Proverbs takes a long term of everything. Wise people say this is wise, and so I'm going to choose this. Sometimes in that path of wisdom, you're going to do sometimes you're going to do the right thing, and it goes wrong for you. But you keep on doing the right thing because a pattern's going to eventually show itself. Look, sometimes you go and you invest money wisely in the best stocks you can possibly find, the best mutual funds, and those things have this thing's been here for 40 years and it's been going up 8% a year for 40 years, and you invest in it, and what does it do? And you say, oh, I should never invest in it. No, generally, that's the pattern. Okay. And yes, this guy over here went and, went out and robbed houses and stole stuff at pawn shops. And he made a lot of money for a few days. Okay, he got lucky that one day and they had a stack of silver and gold in their house. Check with them in 6 months. Don't make a decision on the exception, the short term. But if you want to do wrong, you will despise people who try to give you the wisdom of the majority of life and what happens. And you'll go for the little minority because that's what you want. And because it's funner, it looks because it's short term, and you become a fool and you will not listen to people anymore. But you'll find in the end that the wisdom always works. But there's bumps in the road. And the bad things, temporary exceptions, they happen, but it's not the way it works. So get wisdom and receive it. And somebody who's smart, who's turned out right, who's lived a good life, who has their act together. And by the way, you don't get your advice from your peers. 16-year-olds should not be giving 16-year-olds advice. And you go to someone who's wiser than you and they come to say, you know what, I think you're doing something foolish. You say, boink, perk. Oh, really? What should I do? What do you think? Why is that not good? And listen to them. And listen to them. Because wisdom gives you direction.